Hello and welcome to a little talk about shingle roofs, or as I titled it, where does that bit go and why is it that shape? Because a lot of you lovely people are spending a lot of time and effort making little bits and pieces down here, and maybe you don't realise how it all goes together up there. So hopefully this will help. So this is all to do with our shingle roof and the way we do shingle roofs here. Firstly, there's some naming. Some places call them shakes, some places call them shingles. Some people would say if it's sawn, then it's a shingle, and if it's cleaved, it's a shake. But ours are cleaved, but we're calling them shingles because we want to call them shingles. So that's got that bit out of the way. Basic structure of the roof up there is we have some fairly massive rafters. Now, of course, it's all up at a slightly jaunty angle, but it's a lot easier when it's down flat. But imagine that's up at a slope. This is a rafter. This actual piece isn't a rafter, but trust me, the rafters are about this big. They're huge. We've then got a layer of insulation on it to meet the modern building requirements. And yes, the insulation really is that thick. And then on top of the insulation, parallel with the rafters, we've fitted counterbattens. And they are then fixed with these enormous great stainless steel screws right the way through there into the rafter. So in effect, what we've done is we've pretended that the rafter isn't there, but it's here. And on top of here is where all the shingly business goes. So without more ado, I'll get rid of this bit because we don't need it. So we will now have this is the counterbatten up there on the roof, and all the shingle roof attaches to the counterbattens. But for now, because it makes it easy, we'll put it flat. The various layers, well actually from this point it's fairly simple. We have buttons, like so. And then we have shingles that sit on the battens, like so. And there's the outside world. They are shingle roof. It's perfectly simple, really. So, a few details about the shingles themselves. I have been asked, why have we got such strange widths of shingles? And in particular, some of them are very narrow. Do we really need narrow shingles? And the answer is yes, we do. Step back a little bit. If these were all beautifully manufactured in a factory and they were all exactly the same width, then we wouldn't need any narrow ones because they're all the same width. But we do need narrow shingles because the layers of shingles, when they go on the roof, so that's the first layer down there. The second layer of shingles, we want to place the shingle so it covers the gap. So now that would be quite good, because that one is, this shingle is covering those two gaps there. So when the rain trickles down here and trickles off the end, it lands on the face of a shingle and keeps on running down. If the rain should run between the two shingles, it immediately lands on the flat face of the shingle below and gets sent down the roof. Now, because we've got some slightly random widths, occasionally you run into the situation where you want to put this one here for various reasons, and then this one wants to go there. Oh no, that's got an edge over an edge. That's no good. That'll leak. That's where the little narrow shingle is really useful, because you put that in there instead, and then everything is good because the gaps don't line up anymore. So that's why, because we've got slight differences in width, that's why we like lots of differences in width, because you can almost always pick something that will fit and not disturb the next run along. So, and yeah, if everything was exactly 4 inches wide, we'd simply go chunk, 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 be lovely and perfect. But they aren't, and so the narrow ones are just as useful as the wide ones. So I hope that clears that one up. Right then. So, if this is our counter batten, it's sort of naming things backwards. It's called a counter batten because it runs counter to the battens. Yeah. And there's at various times we were kind of referring to these as rafter tops, because they're like the tops of rafters, only spaced away by the insulation. But we've kind of called them counter battens now. And these are the battens. Well, these are little short lengths of battens. The battens are they're even longer than that, really. They're long enough to fit between the rafters, and they get fixed to the counter battens, thuswise. And one of the important things about the spacing is that the spacing is, oh, there we go. So that is a rafter with battens on it. These are very much just pattern battens to give you an idea of the spacing and the technique. They're spaced 4 inches apart. They're roughly 2 inches wide, so there's a 2-inch gap. But the most important thing is that they're 4 inches from top to top, to top to top to top. And because the shingles are 12 inches long, they will sit very, very carefully done. The first one needs a bit of a bodge, and we'll explain that one in a minute. So the shingles get laid. Find a little something to prop that up with. The shingles are laid so the top of the shingle is level with the top of the batten. Then the next one is up there. Then the next one is up there. And the next one is up there. And what you now can see, we have a slightly short shingle here, because the shingles are 12 inches long and the gaps are 4 inches long, there's 3. There's a factor of 3. You actually have 1, 2, 3 deep before the next one is down there. So some things, yeah, that one's a bit short, you see, that's why it doesn't fit. That's why we don't like short shingles, because they upset the pattern. That way, that's better. So that sits there, and you see that the bottom end of that is exactly on the same line as the top of that one down there. So that's why the batten's at 4-inch spaces and the shingles are 12 inches long. It wouldn't be terrible if the shingles were a little bit longer, because they just stick out over the top. It wouldn't be terrible if they were a little bit shorter, because you can always sort of nudge it down there a bit. But by the time it gets to sort of 11 inches short, then kind of you can't stretch anymore. So somewhere between 11.5 and 12.5 inches is really nice. Bang on 12 inches is really sweet, because then they can just go on. And the interesting thing to note here is, so these two shingles here, how much of them are touching each other? And the answer is quite a lot. Yeah? You've got 8 inches from there to there, where the bottom of this shingle is resting quite sweetly on the top of that shingle. Yeah? So it's not just on edge, it's not like that, it's not sort of hovering. Ideally, they're laying absolutely flat. And that's why the underside of the top shingle is just as important as the top side of the lower shingle, because they spend an awful lot of time touching. And if they're really nice and close and snug, you get a really nice close snug roof that the shingles won't rattle around, the wind won't blow up there, the snow won't come in. This is all ideally, but we can reach for that. We can do that, can't we? So that's why I like to see a shingle that's really nice and flat and even and true on both the top and the bottom, because it makes them fit sweetly like that. The other thing about the fitting here is where the shingle gets nailed, and we'll show you on this one. So this is the top of the shingle, fitting nicely flush to the top of the batten. It's nailed here, so it's nailed into the batten below through the top of the shingle below. And there's a reason for that. Some people say it's halfway. It's not, actually. It's 5 inches down and 7 inches up. So nailing in the middle is nice and secure. If you only nailed at the top, it would be fine-ish, okay, but you end up with a lot of leverage trying to pull the nail out. So that's why you nail towards the middle. And the other thing is that when the next shingle comes on and sits there, it's protecting the nail. Now, we're using stainless steel nails. They're kind of roughy-tufty things. They probably look after themselves. But even so, it's still a hole in the shingle through which, of course, rain might go. So if you make sure that your next shingle is overlapping that nail by a good 3 inches, you're preventing leaks. So that's why you nail there. And the other thing is, when you put the nail in, how do you know where to put it? Well, you know where to put it because the previous shingle is laid level with the top of the batten, so you know that you can come down about 1 inch from the top of the previous shingle and you'll be bang in the middle of the batten. So that's why we don't like them too long. If you get a really, really long shingle and it sort of floats up here somewhere, it's harder to see where the top of the next batten down is, so it's harder to put the nail in the right place. So that's why we like the right length on our shingles. So this is a good shingle. How do we know that this is a good shingle, apart from the fact I've written it on it? It's a good shingle because it's flat. It's flat on the top, it's flat on the bottom, it's got square ends, it's got flat sides, and it doesn't have a twist on it. This shingle can probably, if the ones below it are nice, can be laid this way, that way, or that way, because it's flat and even. It can. This is really nice. We can aim for this. I made this one. So I'm not Superman. So you can make this one as well. You can make them like this. They're really nice when they're like this, because you can just pick up a shingle, pretty much place it on the roof, and you know it's going to fit. Because what it's fitting on below is another layer of these, which are all flat and even. And this is ideal world. You just pick up a shingle and you can place it, and it will fit. We accept not all shingles are beautifully even and flat. This one is slightly thinner at that end than this end, so we would put the slightly thin end at the top. Some have got a slight curve on them. Oh no, I selected ones without curves. How's that? In which case we lay them slightly curve up, so that they deal with the water slightly better. So if they're curved down, they've got gaps in them, and it all doesn't work terribly well. So that's my take on sizes and shapes and things. The little interesting thing is down at the bottom end. So just I'll extract those ones. If this really is the bottom of the rafter, so we don't want to end the shingle there. We want to stick the shingle out there by about 2 inches, so that when the rain falls off here, it doesn't just drip straight on the rafter. So what we do for that is we have some 6-inch shingles. Now this is breaking pattern slightly, so follow me through, because otherwise it doesn't work. If you were being very strict about it, you would say, oh, what you need is a 4-inch shingle, and it would sort of dangle on the end there. But we kind of reach up a little bit and make it 6 inches, so it's sitting under the next batten up. And then on top of that, we put this one, which is 10 inches long, and so that ends up in the same place down there. And then we've got a full length 12-inch shingle which goes to the top of that batten, and so our eaves are now 3 deep, which is nice and solid, and that's what we've got up there. Can't read that.
Sweet chestnut coppiced. Sweet chestnut. That's
Yeah.
what we're using.
Yes. That doesn't change what shape it is, but yes, these are made of sweet chestnut. Apparently, I have to say this. So that's the detail at the bottom, which is the slightly short shingles. The detail up here of interest is the battens. Now, these are just for model purposes, and these are flat and square. And those of you in the know with good eyesight will notice something slightly wrong with them. The shingles are only touching on the very top edge. Now, we ideally want to have a nice big flat contact there, so the battens need to be slightly slopey. Like, these are real battens. I know this is a real batten because this is an offcut from a batten which I fitted yesterday. So the battens are slightly tapered, and the taper is thin end at the top, yeah, and then the shingle will fit an awful lot better on the tapered batten. It's a much flatter contact to the batten, so that's why the battens are a slightly odd shape. Now, modern roofing uses very standardised flat battens like this. If you give it just the tiniest little bit of a taper, you get a more secure fixing from the shingle, that rather than just kind of like touching at one edge with a nail holding it on, it's actually it's sitting on the batten. And if I've got the angle exactly perfect, I've done my best, then those tapered battens will take all the shingles all the way. If all the shingles are nice and even, now the one thing we do know for sure is that the rafters are straight. This isn't necessarily the case on this roof and this roof, which are also shingle roofs. Not even the rafters are flat and straight, but on this building here they are. So we use that. We have flat shingles. We have tapered battens of the right size and shape. and spacing. I'm a bit of a demon for it. I'm up there with a tape measure, literally with a tape measure. Every batten I'm fitting in, I'm going, is it 4 inches from the previous one? Oh, that's not even good enough. I'm checking down the roof, going, have we got a good 4-inch pattern all the way down the roof? Because otherwise you go, well, it's nearly 4 inches. Well, actually it's 4 1/4, and the next one's 4 1/2, and the next. I think it's worth checking them that they do go in at 4 inches, because that keeps the pattern good, it keeps the overlap good, it makes you a good, strong, waterproof roof. And use your tape measure when you're up there fitting the battens, and use the tape measure when you're fitting the shingles, because not every shingle is 12 inches. You put a shingle on, you go, oh, that looks a bit odd. Measure it and go, oh yeah, that's a short one, or oh, no, that's a long one. I like doing it that way. It makes it nice and even and strong and waterproof. There is another train of thought, which is you can have it nicely wavy and rustic. Well, yeah, you can do that if you want to, but I think a good straight line here. So this was a high status building, if it's what we think it was. This is Mr. Gresham's workshop, and that is a saucepan of soup. I think that means it's probably soup time. Right, so have I answered the question? Where does it go and why is it that shape? I think I have. Any questions?
What sort of nails do you use?
We're using stainless steel nails.
How long are those?
Stainless steel annular ring shank nails.
Right.
They have to be stainless because sweet chestnut eats steel nails,
Okay.
As does oak. So therefore we use stainless.
What would they have used years ago?
They would have used sweet chestnut because it makes these shapes nicely.
But the nails?
The nails, they were probably pegs. So just like the frame is held together with hundreds of pegs, the roof shingles would have been held on with tiny little pegs, but they would have been handmade probably from seasoned oak into a green sweet chestnut shingle. That'll go nicely, but you'd have to drill it. You'd have to drill it in situ because you're drilling through the shingle and the batten in order to put a peg through. And it'd be a little peg, and they're fragile little darlings, and they're fiddly to make, and it would be gorgeous, but we'd be here till, I don't know how long. And of course, if you were up there doing it with a hand drill, every single hole has to be.
I'm assuming you drill the holes to put in the stainless steel nail.
Yes, we do.
So you
yes.
don't split the shingle.
Yes. I think there are some brave folk, maybe using slightly bigger, fatter, thicker shingles, who are prepared to just drive a nail straight through. But we've tried that. You end up with lots of split shingles. So just a quick and then nail it in. And apparently it's soup time. Any other questions?
Super.
What's the soup? It's a vegetable soup.
It gets worse, you know.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
People clarity about what goes where. I'll go and make the soup pot now.
Yes.
Yes, well done, JP.
Thank you.
So what's it all in millimetres then?
It is
300.
300, 304, I think it is.
I'm
Check that.
measuring it to 300.
Yeah, 304 millimetres. A foot, 12 inches. That, of course, depends on the skill and accuracy of the man with the chainsaw who's cutting the tree into lengths.
Do you
There's
put
some
any-
thickness, isn't there? With the insulation.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean even the
even
the
that.
roof here is quite thick. There's another little trick of geometry with the roof that is kind of like, are you sure about that? which is that the shingles are at a slightly flatter angle than the roof. Because, of course, the top of the shingle is on the batten, the bottom of the shingle has got two other shingles between it and the batten there, so that the slope of the roof is quite steep. The shingles are not quite as steep as the roof is. And that's probably part of the reason why we go for a really steep pitch on the roof, to encourage the rain to get off the roof quickly. But then of course, to catch the rain in the gutters, you need to slow down the water slightly, because otherwise it goes, it just goes straight off. And that's where are we still going? Yeah, we're still going, aren't we, till the soup is hot. That's where the sprockets come in. And the sprockets on a slightly more conventional proportioned roof probably just take the last 2 or 3 courses of shingles and just flatten them even further, so that the rain just slows down before dropping into the gutter rather than shooting straight off. But because of our roof geometry there, the shingles, the sprockets, as I think Steve and Chris know only too well, the sprockets are about 6 foot long, and they poke through the insulation. But the insulation doesn't cover the sprockets, because the insulation is for the building, not for the roof. So the sprockets actually stick through the insulation, and on the outer edge of the roof we are actually putting the battens straight onto the sprockets, which are sort of standing in place for the rafters at that point. Further up the roof we're putting the battens are going onto the counter battens, which are on top of the insulation on top of the rafters. And of course, this is not just a scale model, this is an accurate angle model. If that's the counter batten on the main roof, and this is the angle of the sprocket, it's quite an angle there. And the art of the shingle layer, which is, fortunately we've got Sarah as expert shingle layer, is to lay the shingles up here and get them to change angle, so that as they come up here, they do the right thing.
Does that angle sort of act like a ski jump and the water goes?
It's not quite that severe, but it does. If the water is coming down here, it just slows it down. It won't kick it up like a ski jump. It just slows it down. It's got a fair way to run down the sprockets as well before it finally drips off. So, but then we had to do that because we needed to reach out so that the water discharges well away from the wall. We're intending to catch it in gutters as well, because we harvest our rainwater.
Would they have had gutters?
That is a very interesting question. I don't know. I don't think they were common. You just have the rain dripping, but you want to make sure it drips a good yay far away from your wall, especially if the bottom of your wall, it's a combination. If your wall is a cob wall or just earth render or something, if that's constantly getting dripped on, that'll erode. So that's why you want to keep it a nice distance away. And you can actually see, it's difficult to see with scaffolding in the way. We've got about that much gap. And the other thing that complicates it, when the rain drips down, of course the wind will blow it back onto the building. It always does, doesn't it? On one side or other. But we do our best, and if we do catch it in gutters, which are probably going to be something along those lines, then we've got 2 fairly large roofs harvesting a lot of water for us. So we like that.
How are we dealing with the apex?
That is a fantastic question. So a little bit like at the bottom here, where the shingles get shorter, at the very, very top, now you can't see it from there, but I can see it. The ridge of the cartilage here is an apex under construction. So there would be a shingle from this side, and then a shingle from this side, and then I'm not quite sure of the lengths because we haven't quite worked it out yet, but there would then be a shingle from this side, slightly shorter, and then one from this side, slightly shorter, and you might even get another one on this side as well. Just trying to get as close a ridge as you can get, and then over the very top, which was done on the barn roof and might be done to the cartilage roof as well, you'd put some kind of metal capping. You